Jake Miller pressed his face against the cold window of the spaceship. Stars moved past like tiny white dots in the black sky. He was 8 years old, and this was his first time traveling so far from home. His older sister Amy sat next to him, reading something on her tablet. "Look, Amy, there's a planet with rings around it," Jake said, pointing at the colorful world spinning below them. Amy looked up from her reading and smiled. "That's Saturn, Jake. We learned about it in school, remember?" Jake nodded, but kept looking out the window. Everything looked so different from up here. Their home planet Earth seemed so far away now. He missed his dad Pete, who was working on another cargo ship somewhere else in the galaxy. Pete had to work a lot after their mom Helen died 2 years ago. Jake held his stuffed bear tighter. Mr. Buttons was brown and soft, with one eye missing. His mom had given it to him when he was very little. Now Mr. Buttons went everywhere with Jake. The spaceship they were on was called the Starwind. It was not very big, but it was clean and safe. Jake and Amy were traveling to meet their dad on a space station near Jupiter. They would spend 3 weeks together before Pete had to go back to work. "Attention, passengers," a voice said over the ship's speakers. "We will be stopping at the Draconis station in 2 hours to pick up more travelers." Jake liked the sound of that name. Draconis. It sounded like dragons. His mom used to read him stories about dragons before she died. She would sit on his bed every night and read from a special tablet that had all her favorite stories on it. Jake still had that tablet. He kept it in his backpack with Mr. Buttons. Amy was 16 and acted like she knew everything. She took care of Jake when their dad was away working. She was nice most of the time, but sometimes she got tired of watching him. "Jake, stop bouncing your leg," Amy said without looking up. "You're shaking the whole seat." Jake did not know he was bouncing his leg. He did it when he was excited or worried. Right now he was both. Suddenly, the ship shook hard. The lights went out for a second, then came back on. Some people started talking loudly. Jake grabbed Amy's arm. "What was that?" he asked before Amy could answer. The ship shook again. This time it was worse. The lights went out and stayed out. Red emergency lights turned on instead. An alarm started beeping. "All passengers stay in your seats," the captain's voice said over the speakers. He sounded scared. "We are having some trouble with the ship." Jake's heart started beating fast. He held Mr. Buttons close to his chest. Amy put her arm around him. "It's okay, Jake. Ships have problems sometimes. The captain will fix it." But Jake could see that Amy was scared too. Her face was white, and her hands were shaking a little. The ship shook again and again. People were talking loudly now. Some were crying. Jake heard someone say the word pirates, and his stomach felt sick. "Attention, passengers," the captain said again. His voice was very serious now. "We are under attack. Please move to the emergency. Escape pods. This is not a drill." Amy jumped up and grabbed Jake's hand. "Come on, we have to go now." They ran down the hallway with all the other people. Jake's backpack bounced on his shoulders. Inside was his mom's tablet with all the bedtime stories. He could not lose that. The ship kept shaking. Sometimes Jake could hear loud noises from outside, like thunder but different. Amy pulled him along, but there were so many people trying to get to the escape pods. "This way," a man in a uniform said, pointing down a different hallway. "Amy and T." Jake followed him, but when they got to the escape pod room, it was very crowded. People were pushing and yelling. Jake got scared and let go of Amy's hand for just a second. That was when the ship shook the hardest it had yet. Jake fell down and rolled away from Amy. When he got up, he could not see her anywhere. There were too many people. "Amy!" He yelled, but she could not hear him over all the noise. A woman in a uniform saw Jake alone and scared. Come on, little boy. Get in this pod quick. She pushed him into a small round room with seats. Other people got in too, but Jake did not. See Amy anywhere. Wait, my sister. Jake yelled, trying to get back out, but it was too late. The door closed with a loud hiss. The pod shot away from the big ship like a bullet. Jake was pushed back in his seat. He could not breathe for a few seconds. Through the small window, Jake watched the star wind get smaller and smaller. He could see bright flashes of light around it. Those must be the pirates shooting at it. Where's my sister? Jake asked the woman next to him. Don't worry, honey. She's probably in another pod. We'll find her when we get to safety. But Jake did not feel safe. He felt very alone and scared. He hugged Mr. Buttons and closed his eyes. The escape pod flew through space for what felt like a very long time. Jake must have fallen asleep because the next thing he knew, someone was shaking him awake. Hold on, everyone. We're going to land soon. Jake looked out the window. Below them was a planet that looked strange. The ground was red and orange like fire. There were tall mountains and what looked like rivers of lava. 2 suns hung in the purple sky. Where are we? Jake asked. I don't know, son. The pod's computer picked the closest planet. The pod started shaking as it entered the planet's atmosphere. It got very hot inside. Jake held on tight to his seat. And to Mr. Buttons, the pod hit the ground hard. Jake's teeth rattled and his head hurt. Smoke started coming from the walls. Everyone out, quick. The woman yelled. Jake grabbed his backpack and followed the others outside. The air was hot and smelled like rotten eggs. The ground was rocky and red. Strange purple plants grew everywhere. Jake looked around at the 6 other people who had been in the pod with him. They all looked scared and confused. The emergency beacon is working, one man said, looking at a small device. Help will come soon, but Jake had a bad feeling about this place. It felt dangerous, like something was watching them from the rocks and strange plants. What planet is this? A woman asked. The man with the device looked at it again. His face went white. Oh no, he whispered. We're on Zarian Prime. Everyone got very quiet. Even Jake knew that name. Zarian Prime was the planet everyone was afraid of. It was where the dragon creatures lived. The ones that ate anyone who came to their world. We have to hide, someone said, before they find us. But it was too late. As the 2 suns began to set and the sky turned dark, Jake could hear sounds. In the distance, deep, rumbling sounds like thunder. But this thunder was moving, and it was getting closer. The 6 adults with Jake were very scared. They whispered to each other and kept looking at the dark sky. The strange sounds were getting louder. It sounded like big animals walking on the rocky ground. We need to find somewhere to hide, said the woman who had helped Jake into the escape pod. Her name was Linda. There's a cave over there, pointed a man named Bob. He was tall and had gray hair. Everyone started walking toward the cave as fast as they could. Jake had trouble keeping up because his legs were shorter. He held Mr. Buttons tight and tried not to cry. He missed Amy so much. He wondered if she was safe. The cave was dark and smelled musty. It was big enough for all of them to fit inside. They sat down on the rocky floor and tried to be very quiet. Jake could hear his own heart beating. Outside, the sounds got louder and closer. Now Jake could hear breathing. Big, deep breathing like a giant animal. Sometimes there were clicking sounds, like claws on rocks. Maybe they won't find us, whispered Bob. But then Jake saw something that made his stomach drop. 2 huge yellow eyes were looking into the cave. They glowed in the dark like flashlights. The eyes were as big as dinner plates. Linda saw them too and grabbed Jake's arm. Don't move, she whispered so quietly Jake could barely hear her. The eyes moved away. Everyone let out a breath. But then more eyes appeared. These ones were green and even bigger. Then came red eyes and blue eyes and purple eyes. Jake counted 5 pairs of eyes looking at them. One of the adults started crying softly. Another one was shaking so hard his teeth were chattering. "I don't want to die," someone whispered. Jake felt very sad and scared. But he also felt something else. He felt sorry for the adults. They were so afraid that they could not think clearly. His mom had always told him that when you are scared, you should try to be brave for other people. Jake stood up slowly. Linda tried to pull him back down, but he stepped away from her. "It's okay," Jake said quietly to the adults. "Maybe they're not mean." "Jake, no," Linda whispered loudly. But Jake walked toward the front of the cave. The big eyes watched him come closer. He could see shapes now in the darkness. The creatures were huge, bigger than houses. They had long necks and wings folded against their backs. Their skin seemed to shine with tiny lights, like stars. Jake stopped right at the opening of the cave. One of the creatures moved its giant head down until it was close to Jake. This one had dark blue skin that sparkled and yellow eyes. Old scars covered its face and neck. The creature's head was bigger than Jake's whole body. Its mouth was full of teeth as long as Jake's arms. One breath from it could blow Jake over. But Jake was not afraid. He had read about dragons in his mom's stories. In those stories, dragons were usually just lonely or misunderstood. "Hello," Jake said in his normal voice. "My name is Jake Miller. I'm 8 years old." The huge creature tilted its head to one side, like a dog when it hears a strange sound. Behind it, the other creatures moved closer. Jake could feel them looking at him. "Are you hungry?" Jake asked. "I have some food in my backpack if you want." The creature with yellow eyes made a sound. It was not a roar or a growl. It was more like a hum, deep and low. The other creatures made similar sounds back. Jake realized they were talking to each other, but not with words like people used. They were talking with sounds, and maybe with their minds. The yellow-eyed creature looked at Jake again. This time, Jake felt something strange in his head. It was like someone was gently touching his thoughts. It did not hurt, but it felt weird. Then Jake heard a voice in his mind. It was deep and old, like an ancient tree might sound if trees could talk. "You are not afraid, small one." Jake blinked. "Are you talking to me?" In my head? "Yes, I am Zixthara. I am old and have seen many of your kind, but none like you. You can read my thoughts? Only the ones on top. I do not go deep without permission. That would be rude." Jake thought that was very polite for a giant dragon. "Thank you for being polite." Zixthara made that humming sound again. "You think of us as dragons. Interesting. We call ourselves Vorthik." The other creatures, or Vorthik, moved closer. Jake could see them better now. They were all different colors and sizes, but they were all very big. One was silver with green eyes. One was red with black spots. One was golden yellow with purple eyes. The smallest one was dark green with white stripes, but it was still much bigger than Jake. "These are my family," Zixthara said in Jake's mind. "Morjeth, Silvana, Kethron, and Veltar. Nice to meet you all," Jake said out loud. He thought they might not all be able to talk in his head like Zixthara. The green one with white stripes, Veltar, made a different sound. This one was higher and more upset. Veltar kept moving around and could not seem to stay still. "Veltar is young and has trouble sleeping," Zixthara explained. "The war has been hard on the young ones." "What war?" Jake asked. "The war with everyone else. Your people and all the others who come here to hunt us. They want our scales, our blood, our bones. They think we are just animals." Jake felt very sad when he heard this. "That's terrible. No wonder you're upset." Behind Jake, the adults in the cave were whispering frantically. They could not hear what Zixthara was saying in Jake's mind, so they thought Jake was in great danger. "Jake, get back here right now," Linda whispered as loudly as she dared. But Jake ignored her. He was looking at Veltar, who was still moving around restlessly. The young dragon reminded Jake of himself on nights when he could not sleep because he missed his mom. "Veltar looks tired," Jake said to Zixthara. "Yes, the young ones have forgotten how to rest peacefully. There is always danger." Jake had an idea. He took off his backpack and pulled out his mom's tablet. The screen lit up when he touched it. "What is that?" Zixthara asked. "It has stories on it. My mom used to read them to me before bed. They helped me sleep when I was scared or sad." The Vorthik all looked at the tablet with interest. They had never seen anything like it. "Stories?" Zixthara sounded confused. "What are stories?" Jake was surprised. "You don't know what stories are? We know history. We know facts. We know memories. But stories?" Jake smiled. "Stories are like dreams that you share with others. They're not real, but they teach you things and make you feel better." He looked at Veltar, who was still restless. "Would you like me to tell Veltar a bedtime story? It might help with the sleeping problem." Zixthara was quiet for a long moment. Jake could feel her thinking hard about this strange idea. "The others will not like this," she finally said. "We do not trust your kind." "I understand," Jake said. "But I'm just a little kid. I can't hurt anyone, and Veltar looks so tired." Zixthara spoke to the other Vorthik in their humming language. Morgith, the silver one, made angry sounds. Sylvana, the red one with black spots, hissed. Kethron, the golden yellow one, seemed unsure, but Veltar made a soft sound and moved closer to Jake. The young dragon's eyes were sad and tired. "Veltar wants to hear," Zixthara said, sounding surprised. Jake sat down on the ground and opened his tablet. The screen showed a list of all his mom's stories. He picked one called The Lonely Star. "Okay, Veltar," Jake said, looking up at the big green dragon. "This is a story my mom made up for me. It's about a star who thought no one cared about it." Veltar settled down on the ground, bringing the big dragon head closer to Jake. The other Vorthik watched carefully, ready to stop Jake if he tried to hurt their young one. Jake began to read in the same gentle voice his mom had used with him. Jake cleared his throat and began to read from his mom's tablet. His voice was soft and gentle, just like his mom's had been. "Once upon a time, there was a little star named Stella. She lived far out in space, away from all the other stars. Every night, she would shine as bright as she could, but she felt very lonely." Veltar's big green eyes watched Jake's face as he read. The young dragon stopped moving around and lay down completely on the rocky ground. Stella thought that nobody could see her because she was so far away. She thought that her light did not matter to anyone. This made her very sad. Jake looked up from the tablet to see if Veltar was listening. All 5 of the big dragons were watching him now. Even Morgith, who had seemed angry before, was paying attention. But what Stella did not know was that down on a planet far below, there was a little boy who looked up at the sky every night. The little boy was lost in a big forest, and he was scared. Behind Jake, the adults in the cave had stopped whispering. They were listening too, even though they were still very frightened. The little boy looked up and saw Stella's light. It was the brightest star he could see. "Thank you, little star," he said. "You are helping me find my way home." And he followed Stella's light through the forest. Veltar made a soft humming sound. It was different from the talking sounds the dragons made to each other. This sound was peaceful. When Stella heard the little boy say thank you, she realized that her light did matter. Even though she was far away, she was helping someone. From that night on, Stella never felt lonely again. She knew that someone, somewhere, needed her light. Jake finished the story and looked up at Veltar. The young dragon's eyes were drooping. For the first time since Jake had met the Vorthik, Veltar looked calm. The end, Jake said quietly. Sixthara spoke in Jake's mind. That was ... strange. The story was not true, but it felt important. That's what stories do, Jake explained. They're not true, but they help us understand feelings and learn about life. Morjeth, the silver dragon, moved closer. He had many scars on his body, like he had been in lots of fights. When he spoke to Zixthara in their humming language, his voice sounded rough and angry. Morjeth says stories are lies, Zixthara translated. He says your people always lied to trick us. Jake felt sad that Morjeth thought all humans were bad. I'm sorry other people hurt you, but I don't want to trick you. I just want to help Veltar sleep better. Morjeth made more angry sounds. But then Veltar, who was almost asleep, made a soft sound back. The young dragon seemed to be telling Morjeth that the story felt good. Veltar likes the story, Sixthara said, sounding surprised. This is the first time in many months that Veltar has been calm at night. Sylvana, the red dragon with black spots, spoke up. Her voice in Jake's mind was sharp and suspicious. How do we know this small human is not using some kind of magic to trick us? I don't know any magic, Jake said honestly. I'm just a regular kid. My mom taught me that stories can make people feel better when they're sad or scared. Your mother is dead, Zixthara said. It was not a question. She had seen it in Jake's mind. Yes, she died 2 years ago in an accident. Jake's voice got quieter. She used to read me stories every night before bed. When she died, I had trouble. Sleeping too, just like Veltar. Kethron, the golden yellow dragon, had been quiet until now. When he spoke, his mental voice was gentler than the others. You understand what it feels like to lose someone important? Yes, Jake said. It hurts. A lot. But the stories helped me remember that my mom loved me, even though she was gone. Jake looked at his tablet and scrolled through the list of stories. He found one called The Brave Knight's Rest. Morjeth, would you like to hear a story? This one is about a warrior who learned something important. Morjeth made a snorting sound that might have been laughter. I am not a hatchling who needs bedtime stories. But Jake could see that Morjeth was curious. The big silver dragon moved a little closer. It's not just for hatchlings, Jake said, using the dragon word for children. My dad is a grown-up, and he likes stories too. Jake began to read without waiting for Morjeth to say yes. There once was a brave knight named Sir Marcus. He had fought in many battles and had many scars to prove his courage. But Sir Marcus had fought for so long that he forgot how to do anything else. Morjeth's scarred head tilted slightly. Jake could tell the dragon was listening. One day, Sir Marcus came to a village that was being attacked by monsters. He raised his sword to fight, but an old woman stopped him. Sir Knight, she said, these monsters are not attacking us. They are crying for help. Sir Marcus looked closer and saw that the old woman was right. The monsters were not trying to hurt anyone. They were trying to tell the people that their babies were trapped under a fallen tree. Morjeth made a small sound. Jake thought it might be surprise. Sir Marcus put down his sword and helped move the tree. The monster babies were saved, and the monster parents were so grateful that they became friends with the village. Sir Marcus learned that sometimes the bravest thing a warrior can do is put down his sword and help instead of fight. When Jake finished the story, Morjeth was quiet for a long time. The big silver dragon looked at his own scars and then at Jake. "Your stories are unexpected," Morjeth said through Zixthara. Sylvana was still suspicious, but she seemed less angry than before. "Tell me why you are not afraid of us, small human." Jake thought about this question. "Well, you're very big, and you could hurt me if you wanted to, but you haven't hurt me. You've been polite, and you let me tell stories to Veltar. In my mom's stories, dragons usually just needed someone to understand them." "Dragons," Zixthara repeated the word. "You think we are like the creatures in your stories?" "Sort of. But you're real, and you're smarter than the dragons in stories. You can talk and think and feel things." Jake looked at Sylvana. "Would you like to hear a story too?" "I have one about learning to trust." Sylvana's red scales seemed to shimmer. In the light from Jake's tablet, "I do not trust easily." "That's okay. This story is about a flower that felt the same way." Jake found the story called The Garden of Trust and began to read. There was once a magical flower that only bloomed when someone truly believed in it. The flower lived in a garden with many other plants, but it never opened its petals because it was afraid of being hurt. As Jake read, he noticed that all the dragons were relaxing. Even the adults in the cave behind him had stopped being so scared. His voice seemed to make everyone feel calmer. Day after day, people came to the garden, but the flower stayed closed. Then one day, a little girl came to the garden. She was not like the others. She sat down next to the flower and said, "I believe you are beautiful, even though I cannot see your petals." Sylvana's eyes were fixed on Jake. He could feel her listening to every word. The little girl came back every day and sat with the flower. She never demanded that it bloom. She just said, "I believe in you, and I will wait." After many days, the flower finally felt safe enough to open. When it did, it was the most beautiful flower anyone had ever seen. The flower learned that trust takes time, but when someone is patient and kind, it is safe to let them see who you really are. When Jake finished, Sylvana was quiet. Her mental voice, when it came through Zixthara, was softer than before. That flower was wise to be careful. Yes, Jake agreed. But she was also brave when she decided to trust. Veltar was completely asleep now, breathing slowly and peacefully. Jake felt proud that his story had helped the young dragon rest. "These stories of yours," Zixthara said, "they are not just entertainment. They are ... teaching tools." My mom said stories help us learn about ourselves and other people. They help us understand feelings that are hard to explain. Jake yawned. It was getting very late, and he was tired from the long, scary day. But he felt happy that he had made friends with the dragons. "Are you tired, small Jake?" Zixthara asked. "A little. But I have more stories if anyone wants to hear them." Kethron, who had been quiet during the other stories, finally spoke up. "I would like to hear one." Jake smiled and looked for another story on his tablet. He was beginning to understand that each dragon needed a different kind of story, just like each person needed different things to feel better. Jake had been with the dragons for 3 days now. The adults from his escape pod had left on the second day when a rescue ship found them. They had begged Jake to come with them, but Jake said he wanted to stay a little longer. Linda had cried, but Zixthara had promised that Jake would be safe. The dragons had built Jake a small shelter near their cave. It was made of smooth stones and had soft moss for a bed. Jake felt more at home here than he had felt anywhere since his mom died. Every evening, Jake would tell stories to the dragons. More dragons had come to listen. Now there were 12 of them who gathered around when Jake opened his tablet. Some were very old, with scales that looked like jewels. Some were young like Veltar. All of them loved the stories. But during the day, Jake learned about the dragons too. They taught him their real history, which was very different from what most people in the galaxy believed. We were not always fighters, Zixthara explained, as they sat by a warm pool of water. Long ago, we were teachers and artists. We made beautiful things and shared knowledge with other worlds. What changed? Jake asked. He was drawing pictures of the dragons in a notebook he had found in his backpack. Other species discovered that our scales could be made into powerful weapons. Our blood could heal sickness. Our bones were stronger than any metal. Zixthara's mental voice became sad. They began to hunt us. Jake stopped drawing. They killed dragons just for their bodies? Yes, whole families were destroyed. Our children were taken to be raised as slaves. Our beautiful cities were burned down so hunters could dig through the ashes for scale fragments. Jake felt sick to his stomach. That's horrible. We fought back, of course. But fighting changed us. We became angry and suspicious. We forgot how to make beautiful things because we were always preparing for the next attack. Morgith was lying nearby, letting his silver scales soak up the warmth from the twin suns. I was there when they destroyed the Crystal Gardens, he said through Zixthara. The most beautiful place in the galaxy, gone in one day. What were the Crystal Gardens? Jake asked. Imagine trees made of living crystal that sang in the wind. Flowers that glowed with their own light. Rivers that flowed upward toward the sky. Morgith's mental voice was full of pain. I was an artist then. I grew the singing crystals. Jake could hardly believe that the scarred warrior dragon had once been an artist. Do you miss making beautiful things? Every day, but there is no time for art when you are always fighting. Jake looked at his drawing of Morgith. He had drawn the dragon surrounded by crystal trees and glowing flowers. Maybe. Someday you can make art again. Morgith made a sound that might have been a laugh, but it was not a happy laugh. There is no someday for us, small Jake. There are too few of us left, and too many who want to destroy us. That evening, Jake told a different kind of story. He made it up himself instead of reading from his mom's tablet. Once there was a dragon named Morgith, Jake began. All the dragons looked surprised to hear one of their own names in a story. Morgith was the best crystal grower in all the land. He could make crystals that sang any song, from happy songs to sad songs to angry songs. Other creatures came from far away just to hear his crystal music. Morgith was staring at Jake with wide eyes. But then bad people came and broke all the crystals. They wanted to use the pieces to make weapons. Morgith was so angry that he became a warrior to protect his people. Jake looked directly at Morgith. For many years, Morgith fought bravely. But deep inside, he still remembered the music of the crystals. And one day, when peace finally came, Morgith discovered that his claws, which had become so good at fighting, were still gentle enough to grow crystals. The end, Jake said softly. Morgith was quiet for a very long time. When he finally spoke, his mental voice was barely a whisper. How did you know about the music? I guessed, Jake said. You seem like someone who would understand music. Sylvana had been listening too. Tell us, small Jake, in your stories, do the bad people ever stop being bad? Jake thought about this. Sometimes. Usually they stop being bad when they understand that they were hurting people. But sometimes they don't stop, and the good people have to protect themselves. And what about people like us? Do dragons in your stories ever get happy endings? Of course, Jake said. Everyone deserves a happy ending if they're trying to be. Good. Kethron, the golden dragon, moved closer. What would a happy ending look like for the Vorthik? Jake thought carefully. Maybe other people would learn that you're not monsters. Maybe they would want to be friends instead of trying to hurt you. Maybe you could make beautiful things again and not have to fight all the time. That sounds impossible, Sylvana said. My. Mom used to say that impossible things happen all the time. Like how a tiny seed can grow into a huge tree, or how the light from a star can travel across the whole galaxy to reach us. Zixthara had been very quiet during this conversation. Now, she spoke, and her mental voice was thoughtful. Jake, what would happen if we let you go back to your people and tell them about us? Tell them that we are not monsters? Jake considered this. Some people would listen, but some people don't like to change their minds about things, even when they're wrong. And what about you? When you grow up, will you remember us? I'll never forget you, Jake said firmly. You're my friends. That night, Jake did something different. Instead of just reading stories, he started teaching the dragons how to tell their own stories. Veltar, can you tell us about a happy memory from when you were really little? Jake asked. Veltar thought for a moment, then began to speak through Zixthara. I remember playing hide and seek with my clutch siblings in the caves. We would change the color of our scales to match the rocks. I was very good at hiding. That's a great story, Jake said. See? You have stories too. Soon all the dragons were sharing memories. They told Jake about the old days, before the hunting started. They had been explorers and teachers, artists and scientists. They had helped other species learn new things and solve problems. We were the keepers of the great library, Zixthara said. We collected knowledge from all over the galaxy and shared it freely with anyone who wanted to learn. What happened to the library? Jake asked. Burned. The hunters thought our books might contain secrets about how to kill us more easily. Jake felt tears in his eyes. I'm so sorry. It is not your fault, small one. You were not even born when these things happened, but it's not fair. People should know the truth about you. Kethron spoke up. Perhaps they will someday. Perhaps you will help them understand. As Jake fell asleep that night in his stone shelter, he dreamed about Crystal, gardens and singing trees. He dreamed about dragons teaching children from many different worlds. He dreamed about